Hello and welcome to Deconstructing the Construct, episode 76, I think. This is going to be kind of random and sporadic. I just have lots of different comments on lots of different subjects. But then want to wrap up with the energy around December 21st, which it actually is for me today. But I'm expecting it to hit more tomorrow for me. It's going to be a northern hemisphere thing. Okay, so lots of questions and a little bit of confusion around the DTC recent one, talking about July 31st. People asking me, does that mean I think the all caps event is going to happen on July 31st? And that's not what I meant. I didn't even mean to imply that, but I will get to that later. That's part of what I want to talk about later. The other thing that's come up a lot, and I feel like I've got some clarity for myself around, is the difference between volunteers and what I call originals. Now, obviously, this is just me interpreting feelings and visuals, and my interpretation can be off, obviously, but this is how it feels to me, which is there are a number of people, whether it's 144 or 144,000 or whatever it is, who came in this game to be at the beginning. And we project a percentage of our consciousness in the game in order to, accumulate experiences, grow, all of that sort of thing. But that percentage of our consciousness got stuck. To lose it, to sever the connection, is to never be the same. It's because you're losing a part of yourself. And because of the experiences had in here, it's too rich. We've grown too much to let that go. And it's dangerous for the rest of us, the rest of the being. So I think the plan, the only way to fix this was for those people, those originals, to literally go all in. We had to go all into the game, which is a huge risk. At the same time, you've got volunteers who have done what the originals originally did and put a percentage of themselves into the game, an aspect of their consciousness. That way, they had more of a chance to hold on to their connection to themselves, to remember on at least some subconscious level their mission. Because some of us have felt like both, original and volunteer, feeling like you're connecting with both of those sort of narratives or whatever. And I think the reason is because you're an original. Many originals have had what we could call like walk-in experiences, but they're not the walk-in as in like something else completely comes in and takes over. It's like more of you. You just become more of yourself and more of yourself. You become expanded and expanded and expanded. And I think that's because this decision to go all in. So you've been coming in, usually in bits and pieces because it's too much for it to happen all at once. That's my personal, could be wrong, obviously, concept of the difference between volunteers and originals. The taking the knee ritual, because that's what it was. It was a ritual. It was very interesting to watch on a number of levels. One, it was confirmation for me that they can no longer hide in their shadows and their rituals have to be out in the open. to, and this was highlighted by one of the members, which I thought was brilliant, the use of the African scarf was because they have been, as I said in a previous, might have been the last one, I'm not sure, that they're being starved on every level, in the financial 3D, in the energetic, everything. So the adopting of that African scarf was a way of tapping into the energy being generated under the banner of Black Lives and trying to tap into that. There was also, I just knew the word black in this whole Black Lives Matter, for me, has got nothing to do with people's skin color. To me, it was like it represents the virus itself. And it's like those people who are of the virus and so heavily infected with the virus, they're getting the world to protest and march and pray and cheer for the virus. Their lives matter too. Those things walking around that are a virus in human form, it's like getting us to feed them with that energy that they matter too, they count too, their lives matter too. And then I saw Beyond the Veil, I think it's the Chris Geo show, and he did one in regards to this too, the whole BLM and what it could potentially stand for. And I highly recommend that one. I think he's spot on. The need for the ritual and the play out in 3D is like happening in real time. There's the time lag between the energetic and what I've always been saying, like it happens in the energetic and then it has to play out in the physical. The gaps, there's no gap anymore. We've got unification and division happening at the same time. We know that. Events are going to continue until each and every person has reached the line they will not cross. Or basically said they're making a statement that there are no lines they will not cross. And it feels like it very much has to be grounded. So it has to be spoken. You have to do a post about it. You have to tell your family or somebody, okay, now they've gone too far. This is too far. This is the line I will not cross. And that your choices, your morals, your ethics, there has to be a physical, verbal declaration. It's almost a statement. And I think the events are going to continue to escalate to get more and more people to do that. So it's going to go as far as it needs to go. Things are going to get as crazy as they're going to need to get. It's all up to us. I said a long time ago that it feels like we need to become lucid in the dream, and that it feels like exactly where we are. We are becoming lucid in the dream right now. People's ability to manipulate, and manipulate is not a good word because it sounds like against somebody or something else's sovereignty or something, but so manipulate's not a great word, but to play with the reality around them for positive results for themselves and others quicker and quicker and quicker. We are becoming, for me, it's lucid in the dream. It was about a week ago. So, a week ago Saturday. So I woke up with, just thinking about the things I needed to do that day, random thoughts. And after a while, I realized I was rhyming in my head. And I wasn't just rhyming, I was Dr. Seuss rhyming. And I thought it was funny and I laughed, and I could actually feel the energy around me of the Cat in the Hat character. This is weird. I wonder what this is all about. But then it wouldn't stop. Could not stop thinking like that. I could not stop doing it. I started to panic. It's like, oh my God, this is it. It finally broke, but for the rest of that day and for several days after, I could not stop giggling. There was a giggle undertone under everything. I knew something brilliant and amazing had happened, and it was just this bubbly laughter underneath everything. And although it's slightly less, like I'm not wanting to burst out laughing all the time, it's still there. Everything, the underlying current, which is insane considering what's going on out there, the underlying current under everything is positive and giggly. I don't know. Things like what's going on in Seattle, these autonomous zones, these cities within cities. And this might make more sense later when I explain a few other things, but it's like the template of the cities within cities that we've had for a very long time. Washington, DC, the Vatican, and London are cities within cities that are part of the construct control system. It's like we are playing out the dismantling of that frequency, that template, in these situations with like Seattle and the attempts to do them elsewhere that aren't working. There is indications in dream time and downloads and things like that, that things are going to actually get worse, uglier on the surface. For those of you who are not buying into it, not tuning yourselves to it, there is a level of protection, and it is very otherworldly. It doesn't have to touch you. But then it is coming. The rest I need to kind of draw for you in order to explain it all. So I'll do that. Okay, so on Friday the 12th at around 11 a.m. my time, so Sydney, Australia time, there was a distinct shift for me. And what I felt like happened was I arrived in this space, which basically feels like a junction box. These lines are storylines, narratives. They're all on one timeline. To me, we've been on one timeline for quite a while now. But all the different timelines had one major theme, storyline, narrative running for the direction of, the world or the construct. And as we've been collapsing timelines and merging timelines and all of it, we've brought all of the stories, all of the narratives onto the same timeline, which is why they're all playing out at once. I do not believe that we are jumping from timeline to timeline or doing any of that stuff. We're on the one timeline. What we are doing is jumping between narratives. So New World Order narrative is one narrative. Savior meme is another one. We've got heroes, we've got fools, we've got saviors, we've got, you name it, they're all these different narratives. And they're all here, all now, all playing out. But what the proverbial they don't, and I don't think the proverbial they get this. So we have this event here, for example, and they think that means that they've identified the timeline they're on and they've identified the event that comes next. But then we have the ability to go maybe over here and play that event from that timeline, because we've interwoven these in such a way, I can stay there, that we can jump from character to character and put characters from one storyline into another storyline and jump around from event to event to event. And they can't keep up. They have no idea what's going on, is what it feels like. And we've created this rather complex web that they don't understand. Now, all of these events felt very much up until hitting this junction point, this junction box, that one event would happen and then we would have to gauge the response, build energy, do all of that before we knew which one to play next. And that's what feels like is about to change. As of last Friday the 12th, it feels to me like these lines all merged into this one junction box, and from here out, this is one event, essentially, made up of a series of events. But this series of events are set up like dominoes. There's a chain reaction. I feel like the button got pushed to set these off, and we are now in the period between when the button gets pushed and the first event goes. There's no waiting to measure, engage reactions, anything like that. They are absolutely perfectly timed to just cascade. But it essentially makes up one event. I'm seeing the world essentially come onto a single narrative, slowly but surely. We've got people all around the world having protests under the same banner. We're having people all around the world coming together in a more constructive and open and loving way under the same banner. We have people all over the world wearing masks. The thing is, all of these stories, all of these narratives they're our stories. For me, there were a limited number of stories and characters to play in this game when you first came in. And they have been reduced to myth and legend. And they never have really a chance to complete. We've never gotten to the end. Most of the time, we get to the end and they lived happily ever after, pretty much when the story is beginning. What we've been given is backstories. You know, Cinderella meeting the prince, that's the backstory. When they get married, that's the beginning of their story. But all we get is, and they lived happily ever after. But did they? Did he turn into a wife beater? Did they have 6 children? Are they all his? Did she fool around? Did they grow old together? Did they die happily in each other's arms at the end of a very long love story? It's the beginning of their story, not the end. We are writing ourselves out of the construct. We're pulling all of these storylines together and we are going out on one storyline. That's how it all feels like it's coming together for me. Now, the question is, I guess, how long between someone pushing the button and this first event going off? One of the reasons I haven't done this earlier is because I wasn't sure. And to be honest, I'm still not. I thought 31st of July might be when the first of these events go off. But as time's gone on, there's too much energy around this June 21st solstice eclipse, or that I'm beginning to feel like it's closer to that. So like in the next 48 hours. These feel like both shocking and awesome and mind-blowing and magical and devastating and amazing, that's going to be whatever they're going to be for each individual, these events. They're going to be catalysts for people to draw the line. They're going to be catalysts for people to make a stand, change direction, tap into their hearts, whatever it is. What does still feel very strong is that the other side of July 31st looks and feels very different to this side. So I don't know whether we just continue to experience these events and just things just keep rapidly changing or what, but it just feels like on the other side of July 31st, things just don't look the same. There's a lot of things about our superpowers coming on as well. I'm hearing it from other people. I'm dreaming about it myself. I'm seeing changes in my own body. There's the way that things are manifesting, and it's crazy. I almost am waiting for Neo to go flying through the sky at some point. So I've got a friend standing by, some of you may remember, John Daniels, who has been connecting some dots around this solstice that I think are brilliant and would love him to share with you. So, John, are you ready at all?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, lovely.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate this. Everything so far has been a doozy. But yeah, so this eclipse is very interesting, especially with the Mayan calendar conjunction. The thing that got me started on this rabbit hole is that I pulled up this image here. It shows that the totality of it is going to be over India, over northern India. And that's where the greatest possible eclipse is going to be visible. And what's interesting about that region is that there's a very large population of people from the Tibetan diaspora, whether it was recently or over the past 1,000 years, 1,500 years, that they've mostly emigrated to this region that has been in the news a lot for the last week with all of the different World War III memes, if you've seen that, the talk between, war between India and China on their border, etc. It's happening in this region, which is way up in the Himalayas. It looks more like Nepal and Tibet than India, if that's what you were visualizing. Actually, I can show you the architecture real quick. This is a real famous monastery from that region. The region that was in conflict this week, it's called Ladakh, Ladakh. And this is the Hemis monastery. I could be pronouncing that wrong, but it's Hemis. And this is a monastery in Ladakh, which is where the center of all this fighting happened this week between India and China. And this monastery is famous because they claim that they have the actual writings of Christ, Jesus, that, he made his way to Tibet and he had his writings there, he trained with them. And what it seems like is that a lot of the relics that made it out of Tibet during, their various wars over the last 2,000 years wound up in this particular region. And I'm pretty familiar, I'm pretty sure even in the 60s when the Dalai Lama had to flee Tibet that he wound up in India because they offered him sanctuary. And even there's another part of this story that the Zoroastrian, a lot of Zoroastrian people currently live in India because it's just a lot more hospitable for them in terms of tolerance and things like that. So these are just two different religions that have very, very, very deep roots connected to the original kind of core stuff. Mm-hmm. Right. So the Zoroastrian population is going to be living here in India as well. And they're still practicing the original magic, if you want to call it that, according to their books, and it's pretty solid, they taught everybody else. They taught the Druids, they taught the Tibetans, they taught the Mayans, that it all emanated from the Zoroastrians who are still practicing the same exact, ceremonies here in India today, where they're going to be able to visibly see this eclipse and know how to work with it, right? Just like the Tibetans. And what's very interesting about the Tibetans is that they have the Ring of Fire in their vocabulary already. And this is that Ring of Fire eclipse that they keep talking about. So I'll pull this up. This is the Tibetan version of the Mayan calendar. It's their own unique calendar. This one is definitely older. Before it was the Tibetan Buddhist religion, it was the Bodh Tibetan religion, BOD or BON. I can't remember which one it was, but that's supposed to be the oldest religion on earth, or so they claim. But they developed this calendar, they call it the Collar Chakra, and you can see the similarities between it and the Mayan calendar. But there's also this ring of fire that's all the way around it. And that shows up in a lot of their mandalas. I'll pull up one here. This one's got a pink sphere. It almost always has the cube in the center,
Yeah.
right? In that pink sphere, they're calling that the ring of fire. And this little diagram here gives you a good example. I'll just zoom in. 0.6 here.
Mm-hmm.
It says the perimeter ring of mountains and fire. Same concept, but essentially what the ring of fire is, I'll just pull this up here. It says from the Vedic times, fire has been an essential ritual element. The outer circle of the mandala is often explained as a ring of fire depicted by stylized scroll work meant to represent flames. It's been explained as the periphery of the universe or the outer wall of the profane world, beyond which lies chaos. To begin the mystical journey, one must leave samsara, or the world of phenomena, and pass through the flaming barrier to enter the sacred enclosure of the mandala. So essentially what they're saying is that in order to get into the mandala, to get into this cubey-like thing that's going on in here, you have to pass through. And this is not really a cube that's describing the matrix to them. This is a cube that's describing the outside world, like outside of the construct.
Oh, okay.
So ironically, yeah, so that's like a flip on that narrative. But this ring of fire, so you would have to escape samsara to pass through this. And samsara is their version of the rinse and repeat cycle. So reincarnation and all of those kind of the concept of suffering and the mundane worlds and blah, blah. So transcending that, you would have to pass through this ring of fire, and then you would enter into this series of events that it's like once you pass through the ring, that's essentially the event horizon, right? And then you're just kind of fast tracked through a domino experience to nirvana. And
Really?
yeah.
Oh,
And the ring of fire would be a corona, right?
yep.
That's a corona.
Yep.
And what have we been passing through for the last 4 months but the ring of fire corona, right? So I just think it's very interesting that, you know, this week, this whole fighting erupted. And I guess the broader context of the narrative that's playing out right now between China and India is that this started a year and a half ago when India announced that they were going to be building a bridge in this region that's called the Galwan, the Galwan Valley region. And this bridge was going to connect this very, very, very remote part of the Himalayas to the rest of the world for the first time. And it just kind of reminds me of like the energy that you see around like gold-backed currencies, that it's almost like there's this fear that if you connect the system to this authentic thing, that it would unfuck the entire system, pardon my language, but you know.
Yeah.
And it felt that same kind of way, like this bridge project, I had pulled tarot cards around it and I pulled the magician card, that kind of transmutation energy, that it's like once this region was plugged into the grid, that would be something, right? And you know, the cover story is that China is not happy with this bridge because then India has better access to the border and blah, blah, blah. But the deeper story is
who was going to build the bridge?
India was building the bridge. And India, just for the bigger narrative on the world stage, I don't know if you remember in the last year, but Trump had gone over to India and was very well received.
Yeah, of course.
Had that whole thing, and him and Prime Minister Modi have had, you know, a very close relationship. So you would think, you know, this whole project was probably sanctioned because it was an economic thing and trade and the whole spiel, but there's also this very interesting energetic element. So anyways, this whole kerfuffle happened this week, which felt like a cover story for something else that had happened on a wizardy kind of level, those kind of stories playing out. But what
so we've
wound
got
up happening,
China and India are amassing troops there at this moment when there's going to be an eclipse in the Ring of Fire, and you're saying,
yeah,
suggesting that
and
that's the
because of the kerfuffle,
yeah,
because of the kerfuffle, they expedited the building project of the bridge and they finished it 2 days ago. They just like went full overdrive and went crazy and finished this bridge. And then weirdly enough, after that, there's just been this like flip-flop in the news cycle of headlines coming out saying that India seceded and gave the region to China, and then headlines coming out saying India never said that. So there's these like different timelines that are fighting for dominance in terms of what the actual story is, who has autonomy here. But still, like you just said, they're amassing troops. So regardless of what the story is, it's given them full credence to send as many troops as possible to this region, where the only people on Earth who might even know how to work with a ring of fire are still doing their thing, like they've been doing it for 3,000 years, and they're ready, right? And I'm not trying to say that they think, you know, something bad is going to happen, but I just feel like they're expecting something. And it seems like they're just wanting to be prepared for whatever. Because I don't even know if you want to get into the Kraken thing, because I got that ready to go.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, so we'll get there. So I guess, when was it? I believe it was, I can pull this up, June 10th. So June 10th, Q had posted this. I guess we were on a call the next day, the 11th, so that's why I even knew about it. But as soon as I saw this, the first thing I heard in my head was release the Kraken. And I just, you know, I saw that exact, you know, Clash of the Titans kind of thing happening. And weirdly enough, the next day I downloaded HBO for a different reason. And that was the first film that it suggested to me. So I'm like, oh, let me watch through this whole thing.
What's the film?
And I didn't.
Name?
Clash of the Titans.
Clash of the Titans, you're right.
And I saw the newer one with you know, all the stylized CG, whatever. But this particular version of it, so what happens is Hades comes down to Earth to fight with everybody, and he gives them a warning. He says, in 10 days on the eclipse, I'm going to release the Kraken. So Q released this little thing, heard release the Kraken in my head, didn't think much, well, thought a lot of it, but couldn't put two and two together. And yeah, and then all of a sudden I realized that this eclipse is happening 10 days after Q had said that. And when I went on Twitter just to see, this was today, after the rally, someone made this, release the Kraken. Another thing, talking about exposing Epstein, release the Kraken. A meme of the Kraken being released. Release the Kraken, again from today, release the Kraken, same thing, save the children. Release the Kraken, release the Kraken, release the Kraken. So the Mayan calendars end in Age of Aquarius, whatever the hell that means. This eclipse, my brain is doing crazy things. It just seems like, yeah, there's an energy present. So I don't think an actual Kraken's showing up, but this Kraken energy, it just feels like, kind of like if they had a final hand to play, they would have to play it. But it also, it's just like wherever the hive mind is going with this thing, like all of these tweets, they're all related to the same exact subject. And these are all tweets that are coming from like a right-wing perspective, but I saw left-wing, center, completely out of it, all talking about the same thing, release the Kraken, talking about the trafficking, the corruption, the cabal, whatever you want to call it.
So these tweets are coming from across the board, left, right, and center.
Yeah, so I just screenshotted these Q ones to show the group, but yeah, no, I could probably even show, but yeah, so there's ones from the left saying the same exact things just because of the things that happened today. Because there was I don't even want to misspeak, but it was something with the DOJ trying to fire one of the main prosecutors that was in charge of the Epstein case. And obviously people lost their shit because they think that they're trying to interfere with the investigation, but obviously no one knows what the hell is actually going on. So it's anyone's guess, but that opened a whole can of worms and it put that right back into like the central focus. So the energy definitely shifted around that today. And that's just what this feels like. It just feels like the energy around this topic will shift, that this unstoppable Kraken type thing will be released that, like you said, is amazing and wonderful, but also, you know, a lot to process. And there's something that just feels like whatever this eclipse is, this Mayan calendar ending, that it's like the contracts. This is just my personal feeling, but it's like the contracts that are related to that old world, that old construct, that old paradigm, that they're like officially, finally null and void. So
Wow.
that, I would assume.
That's all tying in very nicely with what I feel is going on.
It feels like a paperwork thing. Like paperwork is just being processed, but then at the stroke of the eclipse or whatever, they know it's like, it doesn't matter what they do, it's done. Like they can try it, but it would fall apart really, really quickly.
So you're saying that, at least on Twitter with this release the Kraken thing, it's all related to the kids' information? So are you feeling like that's what's on the
Yeah, that's the way it's manifesting in all of these, unconscious links, because people are just, tweeting at the fly of their finger. They're not really thinking about it. It's just, oh, joke, release the Kraken. But so many people are doing it, and it's around this same topic. And I mean, just like what you were saying with, the marches and things like that, there's so much energy out there that was probably, cultivated intentionally for a purpose, but it seems like that has grown much larger than anything they could ever wish of controlling. And I could just imagine that it's like, if the focus of that narrative shifted and integrated the Epstein thing, because right now it's there, it's in the consciousness, everyone's aware of it, they're consciously linking those things together. When they think about justice and the criminal justice system, they know it's not lost on them, but in the same respects, it's not what the topic is. But once that shifts, I feel like that's an event horizon, that's a marker, because that's when that becomes a Kraken that they should have never created, but they did.
Wow. Okay. What an amazing little picture you've just woven there. Thank you.
Thank you.
How long do they get a total eclipse for in that area?
I feel like it only lasts for a couple of minutes. That seems like about right. But I know, so it's going to cross through Africa, through the Congo region, which has tons of mystical energy. And then it's going to cross over Yemen, which is the Queen of Sheba's capital, that whole spot, which has had, just an awful, awful last 5 years. And then it's going to hit its apex over Tibet, and then it's going to finish by crossing through China.
The bridge thing is, I didn't know anything about this bridge.
Yeah, the bridge feels big, because that's the
Yeah.
centerpiece of their whole narrative, actually.
When did they decide
And it's not.
to build this bridge? 18 months ago.
Yeah.
That's not long to build. I'm assuming this is a rather epic bridge based on the terrain.
Oh my God, yeah. I don't know if it's the highest bridge in the world, but it's one of them, because it's crossing, like a Himalayan gorge. And
in 18 months?
in 18 months. And yeah, and they just accelerated it in the last 10 days when the fighting broke out. Probably not, I feel like it's been almost a week, not even. So out of nowhere, they just finished this thing. And again,
so they knew they had to have it finished before this eclipse.
Absolutely. And that's why it feels like China tried to move in at the last minute, because, rather them than anyone else, I'm sure, from their perspective, but they didn't get that one.
Speaking of Sheba, I know you've got something else there too, which I thought was hysterical.
I'll go there, yeah.
Yeah, go on, please.
So, this is about Meghan Markle, who energetically, I'm not opposed to her. I wouldn't say I'm a fan. She's a royal, so it's like I don't want to commit to that, but I've never had a problem with her. The day of her wedding, just that look in her eye, the way that she stood up there and just had this like force field around her, and to see the reaction of the people in the room, all of the different royals that were seated there, the queen, the way that they were looking at her, it was like they suddenly realized who and what she was in that moment. Like, I feel like she reveals herself to them. We couldn't see it at home, but they saw it. And what they saw was that she was this Queen of Sheba figure reincarnated, and that she was back, and that she was here to fuck up all their shit. And there's tons of stuff online that, you know, claims a million different ways that somehow Harry's from the line of David, and et cetera, et cetera. But what finally got me was when they did the whole Exodus and they migrated west, what they took with them was their son, Archie, right? And the whole story is that Sheba, in the end, she got away with the Ark. And Archie, his name, the first three letters are ARC. And the myth is that the Ark has to travel west, which is where they went, and it's where they are. And you see how the Queen is doing, if she's doing, right? so, so yeah, that's that little rabbit hole.
Well, that's the thing. We just don't know how she's doing it all. No news.
Right. It's I mean, the other piece of this is that it's like, as soon as she showed up on the scene, around the same time, I think it was 2015, might have been like 2010, they discovered Sheba's palace in Yemen. And it was the prophecy of exactly what it was. It was supposed to be buried in sand for 3,000 years, and the sand shifted, they found it. And then the next thing you know, they started bombing Yemen. And what did they start with? But all of the UNESCO sites, which were Sheba sites. And the engravings that were on the wall, even though the language was, you know, thousands of years old, the people of Yemen still speak it, and they can still read it and write it. So you couldn't hide it. So, yeah, it's still very present.
Yet another narrative playing out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, cool. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate you sharing all of that.
Thank you.
I'm not going to be getting any more peace now, so I'm going to call it quits. So thank you. See you on the other side of the 21st.
Yeah, we got 2 hours till the eclipse, so have fun.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't
It's
know it was happening till
2:40 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so yeah, I guess 2 hours from now.
Okay. Bring it.
Right.
All right. Talk to you soon, Don. Thank you.
Thank you as always. Bye.
And everyone else, bye for now.